I've noticed um, a lot of small groups, church groups, or Bible studies. And I've also noticed with that is, people go to these groups and leave feeling alone or feeling unknown. So, how do we create a space that actually you can build real friendships within those groups?
I think that's huge because I think you can easily kind of check the box, and it feels good to be a part of like a group setting and to have that group dynamic of like, I'm not doing life alone. But in reality, you leave that place and maybe you've gained some theological insight. You've maybe even had some time to pray, but you still don't have friends. And so I think there's an emphasis that has to be made on, well, how do you form friendships? And that's what you guys are doing. But how do you form friendships? And really, that comes down to vulnerability, which means confession in the church setting of actually talking about the deep, dark things that we don't want to talk about and having a safe place to receive prayer. But it's also time together. And as much as we want to think an hour weekly or bi-weekly does that, it really doesn't. Like that needs to be the catalyst for time together. Like one of my goals when I lead a life group or for our life group leaders in our church setting is that they would be friends outside of that group. Like that would be one of the goals that we challenge our leaders to is creating a friendship environment. And I'm in a season of life where I don't have like a ton of capacity outside. So I've got my kids, my family, I've got close friends, but I've taken it upon myself of like, well, I want to spark that with these guys that I create launching off points for them to build those things where they're going to basketball games. They're getting wings on a Friday night. They're doing stuff together because that's where the friendship is formed.
So I'm curious, thinking about your backstory a little bit. What are some ways that kind of community, like real gospel community, has like shaped you or impacted you over the years?
Yeah, for the last 16 years, I've been a part of some sort of gospel community expression for 14 of them. Like it's just become such a big part of my really journey of following Jesus. And it started with the first group, and the first week of the first group, we did a share your junk night, which seems kind of crazy. But my leader at the time, I was a freshman in college, he just started, he led the way. And he shared some of the deepest, darkest secrets. And I remember being 18 going like, what did I just do?
Uh-oh. And I'm next in line.
Yeah.
No.
But I did my best to like conjure up something, to share something. And I just remember, even though maybe I went 75%, I did a lot of like, I used to struggle,
Yep.
But I remember
Used to
feeling
as in like yesterday.
yeah, like 14 minutes before this whole thing started. But felt some freedom and like some like that bonded us. And so I remember the next week, like it felt like anything was on the table. And so over the last 16 years, it's been having consistent people in my life that want what's best for me, that know deeper parts of me, that are praying for me, and that want to be with me. And so like having that has been a game changer.
How so you're in full-time ministry.
Yes, sir.
Now give us a little, by way of backstory, maybe give us a little bit of what was that journey like from stepping in that first small group to getting to where you are now.
Yeah, I was a part of a college ministry at NDSU called Chi Alpha, and through that started to feel called to ministry. Probably my second or third year in school, just really feeling like, man, like I want to do this for the rest of my life, or I want to be a part of this. And so I pursued ministry training, worked with Chi Alpha for 6 years. So one of my main roles was overseeing our small group ministry. So really pouring into those leaders, creating the systems, all that stuff. So that was 6 years, training students. I oversaw our internship program for 4 of those years. And then through that, kind of doors open. We worked for a nonprofit, moved to New Jersey. But what had kind of changed is the first thing we did when we found our church was we asked, how do you get into, like, what do you have? Like, how can
Where's this community that I've been experiencing? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how do we have that? And it looked so different than what we had, but the same heart was there. And then, from there, our journey came back to Fargo, got to plug into the church that I really grew up in.
Love it.
And, I've been a part of that now for the last 3 years.
So what were some common themes that you saw? You said, like, okay, over New Jersey stuff, obviously culture different, dynamics probably a little bit different, different church. What are some common themes that you've seen in gospel communities that are working from your experience overseeing stuff to your personal experience living that out in multiple contexts and locations?
There's so many things. First of all, like being a part of one kind of model for it really was 10 years as a student and running that model. I didn't realize how like one-sided I had become of like, this is what it looks like. This is how you do it effectively. And then we went to another church and there was things missing, like it was like, oh man, I wish this component was there.
Yeah.
But then they did something else totally different. And one of the things in my role now is how do we create an effective model? And part of that was what worked in the college ministry setting didn't seem to translate.
Yeah.
And I was able to pick up some things when we moved away. For instance, like one of the groups, we were all young families. We all had kids.
Yeah.
Doing childcare weekly is an expensive feat.
Yep.
But what they did was the guys would spend 20 minutes, the girls would spend 20 minutes, and we would go into another room and watch the kids. And then we would have just other time where we just snack and eat and we'd all be together.
Yeah.
That was like really cool. They did strictly Sunday discussion. So
But so like they were discussing the sermon on Sunday. Yeah.
So what was really cool about that was just church unity. Like everybody was on the same page. Everybody was having similar conversations. So everybody was kind of journeying together. We've always followed more of like the free model, the free trade model, where it's like whatever you feel led to do. And there's so many perks to that. But I saw kind of this unity side of things. And then another group, we went to a church and the first week, the leader sat down. We were part of the first week of this group kind of cycle. And he sat down and he said, I'm going to lead this group this year, but I'm going to tap a few of you on the shoulder throughout the year. And you're going to carry on this group. And I'm going to go start another group. And he built in this whole expectation of multiplication. And in that group, we were only in that group for 4 months before we moved back. But we still stay in touch with a bunch of the people from that group. Wow. They've become good friends. We went and visited them a little over a year ago. And at that same time, there was such a expectation, anticipation to grow, not just numerically, but build leaders. Like it was from the get-go. So I think there's some things that I've picked up.
Yeah, you said something about just like unity too. I think when we let go of our own perspectives, okay, this is what it should look like.
Yeah. This
is what I want it to, I want you to sound like this. If we come to a group, this is how the structure is going to look. And I think sometimes that robs away from the unity that Christ wants to do in that, and being led by Christ. It's like, because I have preferences and probably not the same as yours,
Right.
But as we come together, why are we coming together? And that vulnerability and just having those conversations, just like holding it loosely with open arms. I mean, the way he leads is way better than the way I would ever lead it, So it's important to not always have this perspective. This is how I want it to look like.
What are some things over the years that you've seen like will kill a community? Not necessarily kill in the sense of like, okay, that community no longer exists, but like kill that sense of, okay, this is a real dynamic. There's real community taking place here.
I think one of the things is inconsistency. Is people that show up maybe once a month, or it's a new kind of cycled group every couple weeks. It's just really hard because you feel like you're constantly introducing each other. And I've been in groups like that where it's like, okay, we have 2 new guys, so let's go around and your favorite ice cream flavor, and there's value to that. Like I always emphasize invitation, because that's another reason that it dies. But I would say inconsistency of just not having like the consistent presence of the guys or the gals are going to be there together. They're going to go through it. One of the things that we've done is created 3 seasons where it's like, this is a 12-week season.
Sure.
Or this is an 8-week summer season where you're not committing your whole life away. And so really challenging people like over the next 12 weeks, really invest. And a lot of those groups carry from season to season.
Yeah. A good chunk of those people stay in the same group.
Yes. I think another thing that really kills it is kind of becoming inward focused, meaning kind of becomes like a holy huddle. And it kind of is like, I did my thing. We read the Bible together, and there's so much value to that. But one of the things that we really encourage is like kind of three things: is gather, grow, and go. So there's the being together, there's growing, learning more about scripture, applying it to your life, but then there's the go part. Like, how are you going to live it out?
Yeah.
And so really challenging an application. Bob Goff, one of my favorite authors, he says, I stopped going to Bible studies a long time ago, and I would only go to Bible doings. And so just the idea of like, are we going to actually do this stuff, or are we just going to learn and study it?
Yep.
And so that comes along with, an expectation to multiply and to say, look, there's going to be leaders grown here. Because if there's no leaders being developed, it really does kill a group in a different way than we realize.
Yeah. Anything else you'd add as a killer?
I mean, I think a lack of vulnerability.
Sure. Yeah, because you can be present
Yeah.
consistently, but not actually be open to letting yourself be known.
Yeah, lack of confession, lack of vulnerability, and then on top of that, just a lack of friendship. And like we talked about a bit ago, like that idea of we are together, but we don't know each other. Like you guys don't actually know who I am. Like you do not have any idea of what it is that I'm going through. And so that shallow relationships, it might not kill it, to the point of it being ineffective altogether, but it's going to kill it from being what it can be.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, particularly on that one, the lack of vulnerability, what are some of the things that block vulnerability from happening? Are there any things where you're like, okay, I've seen in a community this thing happen, and that's prevented people from opening up?
Probably a lot of things. I think
there's probably more things that block it than there are things that create it.
Yeah. I mean, I think just pride in general, like we're prideful people. Like we don't want people to see, our flaws. And there's a saying of like, you can impress people with your strengths, but you really win people. You I don't know the saying, but it's by your weaknesses. And so I think oftentimes we are convinced we're alone is one of the reasons that we block it. Like I'm the only one.
And no one else struggles with this thing or.
Yeah. And so I think that shuts it down because you go into it going like, man, these guys are all great. Or honestly, there's practical things. Like I've learned that, don't call on the person that isn't going to be open and vulnerable. Like, and I know that as a leader, I'm like, yeah, they struggle with that.
Yeah.
Call on the person that like might be a little too loose, but they set the tone of like, oh, if he said that, I could say this, and there's just a level
Maybe I'll have to talk to him afterwards about not saying so much, but at least we got the ball rolling.
Yeah. I think there's just like the levels of, we think we're alone, but also we think that we're going to be judged. And I think that's an important thing in a gospel community is you have to create that safe place. You have to protect that. Like we always say, like what's said here stays here. Like if you open up about something, it's not going to leave these rooms. It's not going to go to the roommates. It's not going to be the topic on the town hall. Like, no, we are here as brothers or sisters, and James 5:16, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another and you'll be healed. Like there's healing when we do this.
Yeah.
But I would say it shuts down when either that safety isn't established or there's a breach of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, and when people, I think particularly, this is just some stuff I've been reading and listening to recently. I was mentioned in multiple spaces the decreasing amount of trust that people have towards institutions in general, but particularly towards the church. So I think when you have a group of people who are coming to a thing that they perceive already as low in value for their trust, like thinking of someone who might come to a small group and be like, well, I'll come, a friend invited me, but I don't know about they've already got the walls up. I don't know about this Christian thing. You really have more work to do to build that trust, or to use the term you're using, to make it feel like, okay, this is a space that is safe for me to be open about who I really am. Whereas we tend to want to assume that we're kind of like we're starting at zero with people. I think really in a lot of cases you're actually starting at like -10 or maybe -20 with most people.
Good point. Yeah.
And like you actually have to, and this is where, I mean, I know Lucas, you mentioned a similar experience to what you said, Stephen, about coming into a group of people and the leader starts out with, hey guys, here's what I'm really struggling with. And everyone in the group is kind of like, whoa, like we're jumping into this end of the pool right now.
Yeah.
And I think, but what that does is that right away, that takes you from, negative 20 on the trust scale to like, okay, maybe I'm moving up to 0. Because if if the person who's in charge is saying, look, I struggle as well, then maybe it's okay for me to be someone who also struggles.
Yeah, I got to, I'm leading this young group of guys. They're all in high school, and there's about 10 of us. At the first time meeting all of them, we're all sitting in a circle at the office in the conference room, and I just go first. I just tell my story, and I really open up to them, and it's just so crazy. And one of my other buddies was there with me too. He goes second, and just full vulnerability, and then one of the high school guys just starts us up, and we just go in a circle. Yeah. And one of the things they all said at the end are like, "I've never seen anything like that," and this idea of this, I have to have this perception of, so no one sees this thing. Like, that's the thing we wanted to break as soon as we get into that room, right? It's like, those guys opened up in ways, and they thought they were the only one struggling with that one thing, like I'm the only one. And that's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to isolate us, but to say, hey, me too, you too, like now we can build something.
Yeah.
Now we can continue this conversation. Now we can come back next week and check in on each other. Now we can do this, so it's so important and so crucial too. And to just, someone has to go first, and if you're a leader and leading a group, just go first, right? Or if you are someone that wants to start a group, just go first, so.
There's this book called Scary Close by Donald Miller. And he talked a lot about just like that vulnerability piece and like not letting people get close to him. And it kind of led him on this journey where he eventually went to this retreat center where essentially they couldn't tell anybody their full name or what they do for a living. And so he was just Don. Like that was all he could introduce himself as. And he was just confronted. He actually checked himself out because he broke and he's like, I wrote a best-selling book called Blue Like Jazz. And, like he had to like say who he was, because what he really got to is this idea that we have this false self that we cover up those weaknesses. And that false self prevents us from relationship. It prevents us from truly connecting with people. So therefore it also prevents us from freedom, because as long as we have to keep up this false persona of who we are, like it's not that God can't bypass that. It's just that until we give it to him, he can't. So in relational settings, we don't experience the freedom because we think, well, I have to be this false version of myself that I think will get accepted. And I think more often than not in my life anyways, I know there's people that get hurt by this, but more often than not, people accept me with open arms. Like I remember the first time I opened up about just some sexual sin in my life, I'd kind of blanketed with the used tos and the back in the day I used to struggle. And I was in a group setting. It was actually at a leader training event. And it was the first time I told anybody what was going on presently in my life. And I remember like, I don't know if my eyes were closed or if I was just looking at my feet, but then I looked up and there's tears rolling down guys' cheeks. My leader reached across and hugged me. Other guys hugged me, and I shared it with my pastor, Brad Lewis. He just like cried with me and hugged me and just said, "Thanks for telling me that. Let's pray. Let's do this together." And I think I was fearing I was going to be met with like, "You can't be a leader anymore. You can't, you told me this, and now this is who you are." It was just met with grace, and I think that's unfortunately not everybody's experience, but I think we can take initiative. If you're listening to this, like you can take initiative to be that person.
Yeah, I mean that's really the beautiful news that's at the heart of the gospel, is that you can open up and be honest about what's going on, and that's actually the place that is the place that God's grace and love is going to meet you most deeply.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to open that up, then in some ways you're like shutting the door on receiving God's grace. And honestly, I mean, like I think similar to you, I've had very few experiences where that has not been my experience. When I like confess something, I receive grace. There have been a couple of times where I've had that happen, and like many people have experienced that in much more hurtful ways than I have.
Yeah.
I mean, my encouragement for someone in that scenario is like, man, you like evaluate, is this the context for me? Because if someone's responding to your confession with like harshness and judgment, that's at least for me, that's a pretty big red flag about how much do they understand of the gospel. Now, right, there is consequences for sin. There's some clear expectations, particularly for leadership in the church and stuff. That doesn't mean we just like sweep sin under the floor or under the rug and ignore it and just let someone continue, like, oh, good job confessing. But if the first response is not grace and kindness and like, thank you for being open and telling us the truth, that's a red flag for me. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's grace and there's truth too. But especially now, and this generation especially, it's like, I think we always have to lead with grace. And we always have to, think of Romans. It's like where grace abounds, sin abounds, grace abounds more, So, but there's something about when meeting people there, like, hey, like, Jesus, how much I can see that through relationship. Like, man, he loves me so much. I even understand what he did on the cross. When people respond in a way that's like so loving, it doesn't even make sense. Yeah. And I was like, wow, how much more does he think of me? And how much more would he respond if this person is responding this way? So, but yeah, it's hard to see. And I've never experienced anything like that. Someone that did not respond well. If I told them something, I never have experienced that, but I've heard, and that's really hurt people too.
And I think my encouragement to that person is, what that individual did was wrong, but also like try again, because I think, and I'm not downplaying that initial experience at all. But I would even open with that of like, hey, I've been really hurt before, but this is a step for me of faith and of courage, because I know that it's worth it. And so just because, if you've ever eaten a food and gotten sick with it, unless you're allergic to it, it might have been a bad batch. And like, I'm going to eat that Oreo again, even though I had a tummy ache the first time. But
I like to use Oreos as the example.
If you're allergic to Oreos, it's all over for you. But no, there's a level of that, of just like, we can sometimes disqualify ourselves from the place that God designed us for healing. And again, that James 5:16 is like, it's in that confession, it's in that prayer that God oftentimes, that's the avenue of healing in our life more often than not. And we cannot remove ourselves from that. Like it says in Hebrews 10, don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And so there's just like a freedom to that when we continue to pursue that. And then as hosts, facilitators, whatever it is of those spaces, that's one thing that I'll probably be the harshest on, is if I hear something leaves that room, and I will bring correction pretty hard on that one, because I'm like, no, that can't happen. That won't happen.
Yeah, you're saying like if in a group someone shares something and someone else goes and tells so and so.
Yeah, I'm not saying
this.
You sin, that can't happen. That no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, so and so heard about what that person did through that person. Like that can't happen.
So I'm curious. You work at a fairly large church. Lots of people come in on a Sunday morning. How are you thinking about how do we help the church as a whole, help people find that kind of community that we've been talking about, versus just like, okay, I show up for various events and that's my experience of the church?
That's a huge question. I think in our context, a lot of our staff has led the way. So it's actually a requirement for our staff to be a part of a gospel community group. But I would say 95% of our staff leads a community group. And so I think it starts from that, of like, is there a culture of it? And for us, on any given Sunday, we have about 1,500 adults, just for context, and rotation of more people, obviously. We have about 100 groups, but I think it's come from a conviction of like, this matters. Like, it's not just, hey, we need more ministry, we need something, but we really truly believe that spiritual growth happens best in the context of gospel community. That you can learn from a message, you can learn from I mean, we have reels coming at us 24/7 of really good content.
Yes. Yeah.
But we need people to live it out with. We need people to challenge us. We need people to know our blind spots, be able to call us out, people that we can pray with. And we had a guy in our group this morning that meets at 6 a.m. on Thursdays. And he's like, I've never been comfortable praying for people. And he asked us, how do you pray out loud? Like, and we were able to talk him through that. And so I think there has to be a conviction that this stuff matters, and really that conviction of how do you make a bigger church feel small? How do you help people get into those? And then you got to start with leadership of like, let's establish the culture there.
Are there are there any specific things that you guys do to like point people or give people kind of on ramps into those communities? Because I know even if there's an awareness of like, oh, this is a thing that's important to the church, that can feel like a big barrier for some people to move from, okay, I'm kind of maybe anonymously a part of this large group during the church service, to, okay, now I'm meeting with 4, 5, 10 people.
There's some churches that I've seen that they will emphasize it every week. Like they promote groups because that's, we have our events still, we have other things.
Yep.
But we have one place that we want every new person to go, and we call it Growth Track. It's a 2-week kind of introduction. So you learn more
about like the starter course.
Yeah. You learn about our church, you learn about the history, you learn about kind of the values, the mission, all that stuff. But then you also learn about how to get involved in a group, how to start serving. And we have 2 challenges for everybody that comes. We really challenge them, begin serving. Like, don't be a spectator. It's so easy in a larger church setting to just watch it. And it's like, oh, this is great. I feel this incredible energy here, and I feel good when I leave, but be a part of serving. And then the other thing is find that group of people. And we use storytelling. We share stories from our own lives when we teach this class of how it's impacted us. And then, so those are the 2 main kind of on ramps. So we've made that as consistent as possible. That, and like for a little context, this past year we had 400 people complete that. So they attended both of those classes.
That's awesome.
And so we really attribute consistency there to seeing those groups continue to grow. And then training leaders. Like if you don't have leaders, you can't have groups.
Yeah.
And I think I've been a part of it before where it's like, we want 100 groups. And then you're like, well, we need leaders then.
We have 20 leaders. Yeah.
So we've been really consistent.
You're each leading 5 groups.
Yeah. So we've been really consistent on, well, we need to create a leadership development pipeline. Like we need to be developing leaders, and through current groups, challenging groups to multiply, to raise up leaders.
What, I love stories too. What are some of the fruits that you've seen that people that actually were scared to step out, and they stepped out, they started serving at church, they joined a life group, or they created a group? What do you see out of that? What have you seen? What are the stories that you hear or you see?
I think some of the stories that stand out to me are kind of the life on life stuff. So we have a young moms group that meets, and they do meal trains every time one of the moms has babies. They do baby showers if they're not having baby showers. And so we see a lot of like the stories that we hear oftentimes are, my group showed up for me, and my group, went above and beyond what the call of the group dynamic should be. We've also seen like life transformation start to take place through those communities. So one couple that comes to our group, I've had the privilege of baptizing both of them. And what's crazy is that 3 weeks into our group, it's a family group, she was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know I got saved over the weekend. And we're like, wait, what? You weren't? And then that obviously sparked other conversations, and being able to have dedicated their daughter, I have baptized both of them, and just seeing them, and he's a part of our ministry training program now. And so just seeing like that growth, and what they told me is like, man, if we didn't have that place to be challenged people to do life with, I don't know if that would have happened. So there's lots of unique stories that come out of that. We did a group did a full on surprise not baby shower, but yeah, baby shower, like gifts. They had it waiting for them 1 week because
Nice.
they didn't have family, they didn't have people in their life. They said that this was like our first group of friends. Like these were our first friends that actually cared about us.
Wow.
And so they brought diapers and they brought baby clothes and they brought high chairs and they just like showered this family with so much love. And so super fun stuff.
That's so beautiful. That's just, for us is we're always thinking about the person that's alone, the person that's hurting. Why we even started Hey Friends, because we've all kind of experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
But to experience when someone shows up, the characteristics of Jesus through other people, it's just beautiful, man. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I think, I know there are a lot of people out there who, they have maybe put faith in Jesus, but are like holding back from the church or holding back from really getting involved in a community in the church. Maybe that's trust issues have been hurt in the past, like we were talking about earlier. I'm curious, what would you guys, both of you, what would you guys say to someone who's in that place where they're like, you know what, I tried that thing and no one gave me a baby shower. They called me a baby and kicked me out. I don't know what like there's plenty of people who are in that space where maybe they really believe in Jesus. They're maybe listening to sermons online or reading the Bible, but they're like, this church thing, that's too painful.
I'll be quick on this one. But I have failed my friends and my friends have failed me. And what that taught me is no one can replace Jesus. Yeah. Right? And Jesus, as Tim Keller says, he's the friend that fully lets you in and never lets you down. But all of us have fallen. And I think I've done that, but I've tried to reach perfection, and that's always failed me too.
Yeah.
Like I'm always going to be there for my friends. I'm always going to do this. I'm going to sound like this. But man, I just want to be faithful towards the Lord, and I want to be faithful towards my friends too. But I know that we've all sinned. I know that there's no one good. I also know that we all fall short too. So man, that can't be the end. The thing that happened can't be the end. And always looking to Christ, and whatever he extends to me, how to extend it to others. So if you're at a place like, hey, I've been hurt, man, look to Jesus and just step out, because I have fallen short and I've disappointed my friends. I've done that. Yeah. And I think as humans, again, we all fall short.
Yeah, I think that there is no perfect people. Like that's the one thing we have in common is that we are not all perfect. And
disappointing.
And so I know as much as there's a level of like, there are things that have happened and people are pushed away and people, but I do think every person, what they can do is they can start to look introspectively and just go like, all right, let me evaluate some of those past experiences. Cause sometimes in hindsight we go, yeah, I felt judged, but I also was unwilling to deal with this thing that was in my life. They called me out on something and maybe it wasn't done perfect. Maybe it felt like it was shame adding, but oftentimes people do have good intentions even when they screw it up. I've done it. Like I've had guys in my group that I've called higher, but the way I did it made them feel lesser and made them go lower because I didn't do it the way that I think Jesus would have. But at the same time, I don't regret having the conversation. I don't regret wanting what's best for that person. And so there's sometimes that's the issue. Sometimes I think it's comfortability. Like we want comfort. There is so much in us that wants the path of least resistance. And so what I've realized with having 3 kids and with having, a busy job and things that I enjoy outside of work is that when it is hardest for me to have gospel community is when I need it the most. And so that's something that we teach our church a lot is like, just because it's hard, that actually amplifies your need for it. Because if you are running to this thing and this thing, you got soccer practice on this night and you've got this on this night, you need to slow down to create space for people to encourage you, to love you, to challenge you. Because if you are running at a pace that does not allow for community, you are running too fast. And so I think sometimes it's just an invitation to people of like, you have to get uncomfortable to grow. Like you have to.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we see it from time to time in a larger church that we make these calls, these appeals, we challenge people, and we get pushback because like, you want me to add something else to my life. And I think what most people experience is that what they thought was adding a time commitment actually added value in ways that they didn't expect, because maybe they gain friendships, maybe they learn something, they grow, they're sharpened, or whatever the case is. That's at least the hope, you know. And we know that I've failed as a leader. Like I've had groups that people walked away from going like, nah, didn't add a ton of value. And I want to say that I can have a perfect group every time, but it's not the case, you know, all the time. So
Yeah, this that comfort, you know, the best way you can love someone is just sacrificial love, and that's how Christ loved us, you know. So if you go to a group and you guys are always just everything is fine, everything is great, I think there's danger in that too. There's danger to staying comfortable in that too, because I've seen the guys that have been said that hard thing, but I knew that their posture was love and they cared for me, and maybe I didn't respond well, you know. But after I just, you know, sat with the Lord and realized, wow, they are right. I do need to remove this. But they also come around you too. They don't just say the hard thing and then leave you. No, they say the hard thing, and I'm going to sit with you on this, or we're gonna get through this together, and we're going to look to Christ together.
I think something too that I was going to say is one of the corrections that I've probably made in overseeing adult side of gospel community is we don't want to lower the integrity bar or like the character bar, but sometimes we have too high of a bar for what's expected of people. And so like I've gone back to just open the Bible and read through the Bible together, read it out loud and discuss it. Or there's such incredible tools. I don't know, Right Now Media is one of them that comes to mind, where you can watch a video, you can read the scripture that encourages you to read, and then they spark the conversation. So I think that, and then what we've really recommended for our leaders is think next steps. So break down each person, like think about your people and shepherd the flock that God has entrusted to you. Like that's the call. And how do you help them each take a next step? So for this individual person, their next step might be recognizing this relationship is leading them to a dark place and that it's not bearing fruit, and they need to address that. They need to address it. But for this person, it's, you need to lead a group. You need to take the step of faith to lead a group and to build a group. But sometimes we can make it too one size fits all. And so then if you lower it for everybody, but when you can really challenge people on an individual level, like, hey, like your next step is to read the Bible every day. Your next step is just to open your Bible once this week because you just haven't ever done that. And we need to get you started.
Love that. Yeah, I think I was looking through here. I think one of the best books I've ever read on Christian community is Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book Life Together. And I'll just read this quote. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on what he says here. So he says, human love constructs its own image of the other person, of what he is and what he should become. It takes the life of the other person into its own hands. Spiritual love recognizes the true image of the other person, which he has received from Jesus Christ, the image that Jesus Christ himself embodied and would stamp upon all men.
Dietrich, just dropping the hammer. No, I read this book. I read this book last summer, and one of the things of that human love versus spiritual love that you just read about is spiritual love really it does care about that person, like you said, that God created them to be. And I think that's in any relationship where I'm married. I've been married for 10 years, and it's easy for me to like want to love the construct that I have in my mind. And early in marriage, I think we all go into it, you know, like, oh, that trait, that one she'll grow out of, you know, and 10 years later, it's like, no, I'm learning to embrace that trait and I'm learning to love that trait, and we want to grow together. But the the true love, the spiritual love comes when we begin to see people the way that God
Yeah.
has created them. That's good. That's a good quote.
Retweet that, you know.
Retweet.
Exactly what he said.
Good old DB, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, I think that's maybe a good place to wrap up. Any final like thoughts or encouragements from you gentlemen towards people in regards to gospel community?
I think it's cliche, but be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
I think if you're a part of a group dynamic that isn't life-giving, find a way to make it life-giving. If you have been hurt within a context you're in, talk to that leader and don't come in like in a guns a-blazing, like fists raised. Just say like, hey, you know, I don't know if you realize this, but like, you know, what we say here isn't maybe what's experienced outside of here. Like I've tried to reach out to get together and just nobody ever wants to, or whatever the hurt is, but address the hurt, because you just can't grow past what you won't define. Like you can't heal what you, that's the same with confession, you know, but I think being that change. So if you want deeper relationships, you know, maybe you don't have a ton of time, but maybe you have enough time to get together with 2 people in your group over the next month and just start that conversation. And if you can have that now with 3 people, the likelihood of that spreading is going to increase. Yeah. So I think just going into it of going, okay, this isn't what I think it could be, but I have what it takes to take it to the next level, you know, and that might just be a group starting and be like, hey guys, you know, I just wanted to say something. I sinned this way and this week, and I just wanted you guys to know and be praying for me. And it might feel weird and out of left field, but there's going to be somebody else that resonates and goes, oh, that's what I want to, you know?
Yeah. And there's risk inherent in that, the idea of going first, taking the risk, if that's not the normal thing, whatever that risk might be, but it's worth it. And I think biblically, right, God honors people who take a step of faith, whether that's a small one or a big one. It's going to bear fruit. It may not be instantaneous. It may not be the exact fruit you were hoping for, but it's going to bear good fruit if you're trusting God and stepping out in faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So whatever that looks like for you, just go first. Take that step. Thank you, Stephen. We love you. And just thank you for taking the time to talk about this. And, you know, I've kind of looked up to you in so many ways. And one of the ways I've kind of looked up to you, it's like, man, you actually live this out. Like, I can see that, you know, and even how we kind of became friends too. And we've gone deep. We've also had, you know, great conversations, but it was always towards the Lord. And I just appreciate that. And I appreciate you, man. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me on. This is so fun. Love what you guys are doing. Right. I love like the mission that you guys have of friendship. And that's a big, big heart thing for me. So it's just been a joy to hang out with you guys today.
All right, friends. We love you. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening. We're all about equipping you to pursue real friendships. You were not created to be alone, because life is just better with real friends. Let's get started.